Delighted you've been able to join us for the second of our conversations about education in unprecedented times. I'm sure you'll know I'm Tim Hitchens, I'm the president of the college, and Hugh David is the development director who will be leading some of your questions in a little while. One of my favourite quotes that I've come across in the course of the last few months has been one from the American screenwriter Alan Ball, who said, "Change happens, don't take it personally." And I think in the course of the last 6 months or so, we've had a lot of dramatic change happening around us. And sometimes we've tried to make sense of it in a personal way. Is this something that has been unfair to us, something that demands something of us? But I think letting change flow over you is actually one of the most appropriate ways of dealing with these extraordinary times we've been going through. And here, sitting in Wolfson College, Oxford, there are some things that have changed, but there are also some things that have not changed very much. And I wanted to start, if I could, with the things that haven't really changed a great deal. And of course, here we are sitting in this wonderful environment, and we are in some ways, though we're architecturally very modern, we are a very traditional college. We're based upon the monastic idea of a small community of people studying and learning and teaching intensively. And our setting, you'll remember, is very bucolic, looking out over the rivers, over the meadows, just 6 minutes by bicycle into the centre of Oxford. So our setting is one that feels quite timeless. And I think we also are a place which has some very timeless values that have not been changed and will not be changed. And I would draw out 4 particularly for your attention. The first is that we're a place that believes in the importance of ideas, the transformative power of ideas, and the ability of universities and academics working in universities to produce those ideas. And those ideas can be as various as the microscope in the 17th century or the genetic code in the 20th century, ideas about society and the economy, such as independent central banks or social safety nets, the kind of ideas that some of our governing body fellows are working on. And we were talking last night to 2 in particular, one who is somebody involved in trying to create virtual courts at a time when we are having physical boundaries, and another person on our team, a scientist who's looking at converting microbes into minerals and perhaps using microbes to create what were rare metals and turning them into metals that are much more easily accessible. So that power of ideas, inventions to change the world is at the heart of what we stand for. We also are absolutely committed to the idea of free speech. This is there in our statutes, it's there in our procedures for the way people have to work in this college, and it's free speech and the requirement to challenge, the requirement to dissent, the requirement to be skeptical. And sometimes when I'm trying to chair a committee and there's a dissenting voice, I have to remind myself it's a good thing that there's a dissenting voice, and that is very much at the heart of who we are. The third idea, the third value, would be education going back to its original Latin meaning of bringing out the best from people and not cramming things into people. The best places in education in the world do that. They look at potential and bring out potential. And I think that is a value that has been here for many, many years and will always be. And the fourth, I think, is probably quite particular to a place like Oxford or Cambridge, and it's creating an environment, an educational, a studying environment, which is humane and human scale and based upon an education that is highly personal, because we believe that a personal education is the most profound education there can be. So those are perhaps 4 things that haven't changed about this place, and I don't think they will change, and I would never want them to change. And as long as humans want to learn and ideas are free to thrive, then you'll have places like Wolfson College. But there are ways in which we can achieve those things which will change and where COVID has helped us along the way. some of these things are the way in which technology makes geography less relevant. So early in the summer before COVID hit, I was due to give an art tour of the extraordinary contemporary artwork we have around the college. And COVID hit, and that went online, and I thought that's fine, but it's not going to be quite the same. It'll be a rather diminished experience. And yet I looked at the audience that joined us, and it wasn't simply an Oxford audience. There was one person who was a surgeon working from Harvard who had taken a lunch break to come and join us in looking at our art here. So the way in which geography has indeed been diminished, has indeed been minimized by the technology that COVID has accelerated. And one of our thoughts here at the college was that we do need to keep up with and stay in touch with those of you who are not physically with us here or necessarily in our time zone. And normally Hugh and I would be, in addition to inviting people to come to the college for the Gaudi in the summer, in addition to going to have our London lecture at the beginning in the springtime and the Christmas party in London, and in addition to us travelling around the world to see you wherever you may be, we wanted to reach out because travel is now much harder. And so we've had one of these events which was looking all points towards the east, an early morning event as far as we were concerned that allowed people in Australia and in Thailand and elsewhere to join us. And tonight's event is designed to look at all points west. So all of you who are stateside, for example, we hope you've been able to join us at a rather more convenient time than might normally be the case. So I was going to do a little bit of looking back at where we were a year ago, a little bit at what we are doing now in the midst of COVID, and then a look forward to Wolfson in the future. So if you moved us back 12 months, you would have found us deep in discussions about climate change. The college knows that this is an existential issue, and that in some ways, precisely because we're a rather modern architectural college, we were designed at a time in the late 60s and early 70s where being energy efficient wasn't the highest priority. We are blessed with a biodiverse environment around us. We own wonderful meadows across the Charlewell River. But we made a decision about a year ago, collectively in the governing body, that we would be dedicating a significant amount of our money from here on in to climate change mitigation measures in the college. And those are things as various as many more solar panels, lots more double glazing, looking at our boiler system, but also looking at ways we can collaborate with other colleges and with the university collectively to make some of the investments that would allow us, all of us, to reduce our footprint. So that was at the heart of what we were talking about this time last year. We were also this time last year talking about Black Lives Matter. And this had not quite reached the crescendo that it reached in the midst of COVID, but we were already reaching out to a number of our alumni who were members of the Black community, trying to work with them to find ways in which we could encourage even greater numbers of Black students to come and join us. We are a very diverse location. We have a brilliant range of people from across all of the world, but the two categories where we do less well, one is students and academics joining us from the African continent, and the other is Black British students. So we were starting our plans to deal with that. We were concentrating in upon the fact that as an Oxford college, we are able to concentrate on expertise in ways that some other universities around the world don't have the luxury of doing. And Hugh and I had just managed to gain for the college a very big investment that allowed us in perpetuity to build up real expertise in Assyriology, a major investment in our ability to do that, and a very good example of the way in which subjects that might be at risk of extinction can be nurtured and looked after in places like Wolfson, which have the resources and have the energy and the location to preserve them. And also looking this time last year at what it means to be international, because looking forward to Brexit, recognising that there's a politics in Britain at the moment which is potentially nationalistic, which is certainly slightly more introspective than it has been, knowing that Oxford and Wolfson will live or die on the fact that it is and is perceived to be highly international in its outlook. And I hope that those people who are at Oxford at the moment and here at Wolfson will understand that this is a place which in some ways is becoming more dissociated from the rest of Britain, precisely because we are staying true to our internationalism and true to those international values. So that's where we were this time last year, having no idea what was about to hit us. And then, of course, COVID arrived. And COVID has produced a rather extraordinary environment. Some of you will have seen what it looks like. Here is a picture, one of the main entrances to the college, and these signs, of course, social distancing signs were up wherever we went. And we got used to the disciplines of this. And unlike some places, we went into deep lockdown very quickly, a little bit earlier than some other places. But we also remained a home for 200 students right the way through the deepest of the lockdown. And that's because a place like Wolfson isn't simply a term time location. It's a place that is a home to many people. It's a place that is a home to many international students for whom travelling back to their other home was not an option. So we know how to survive and support our students through the deepest of lockdown. Luckily, so far, we have had no cases on Wolfson territory, and we really rose to the occasion. The students were brilliant. Our bar had to close, but the bar staff were willing to go to people's doors and deliver their beer and fine wine to their doors. In the early days, when the COVID experience was fundamentally a Wuhan experience, a group of us in the college wrote and recorded a song, which was a song of support for Wuhan, which, as you'll know, is one of the great academic and student universities in the whole of China. So there was a great deal of collaboration and support for each other in those early days. Here you'll see how we've managed to keep the college hall open, and it's now a great vast area of perspex, but everyone now can go in without masks and sit in those places and carry on the conversations in a way that it's as if nothing had ever changed. And you realise that the hall is the heart of the social community, which is the college. We were very worried in the springtime, though, that this new intake of students might well be dramatically fewer than in an ordinary year. We knew that we had both COVID, which is going to make travel much, much harder, and we had Brexit, which might make people believe that we were going to be less welcoming to overseas students. And we were worried that we would have the smallest intake that we've had ever. And in practice, what happened was exactly the opposite. We've had the largest intake of students we've ever had. And we still don't quite know why that is. It could be the rush to quality which comes at a time of crisis. It could be that perhaps US and Australian universities, which are often our competitors in this business, looked even more forbidding. It could be that the reputation of Oxford for medical advances, and Oxford has been for the last 5 years not only the top university in the world, but the top medical department in the world, that maybe that played into the reputation of the university as a whole. It's hard to know, but we are now in an environment where we have the largest number of students here that we've ever had, and it's wonderful to have them all here. So you can imagine the college. We're all in masks normally, with a good 2 meter distance between us, with hand wash absolutely everywhere and perspex. The libraries are open, but they are distanced and you have to book your spaces. We have a packed program, as they say, of events in college, from a whole series of lectures on the constitutional challenges of COVID and the place of Parliament in a crisis, the life in Pakistan at the moment, modern art and sculpture, British politics, peripatetic lifestyles. Please do look at the website and you'll see all the events coming up. So it certainly feels a very busy and buzzing place. This is what it looks like out on that harbour quad, where you can see we've put up 3 teepees in order to encourage and help people meet socially and continue to work and have seminars and discussions under these teepees while staying dry and safe. The bar is now open. The Freshers' Week has finished a couple of weeks ago and was a fantastic success, and a real mixture of online and in person. And the whole principle for Oxford and us has been that we want a combination of online and in-person events and activities. And even if it's online, making sure we preserve the one-on-one relationships, which are so special to the quality of what we do in Oxford. We also managed, as you'll see here, to allow a Hollywood blockbuster to come to town. It was the first Hollywood blockbuster to be filmed in the UK during COVID, and it was the test case for whether you can do filming during a lockdown with COVID restrictions, and it worked exceptionally well. I'm not allowed to tell you which film it was, but there is the logo of the company organising it, so if you're really interested, you'll be able to work out who it might have been joining us. And the other thing I just want to end with in terms of what we've been doing is that we knew there were going to be many students, many early career researchers who were going to face significant hardship because of the COVID impacts. Whether these were going to be DPhil students who needed to have results from labs but the labs were closed, whether it would be DPhil students who needed to go out to visit field work for field work's sake and could no longer do it, whether they were people who relied upon the income from a parent or from a generous relative and those jobs being lost. We knew there were going to be significant challenges for them, and so with the help of many people, we managed to raise £350,000, so about £350,000, to support our students and early career researchers navigate the challenges of COVID. So a fantastic generosity from the community that is Wolfson, but also it's wonderful to be able to support the students in need as they go forward. So let me just end with a little bit of looking forward. And the things that we're discussing now, as apart from COVID, is we have now launched our campaign for Black British students, scholarships. So if you're interested in supporting us or working on that, please do get in touch. We've got a major work stream relating to don't forget climate change, because though we know the immediate challenge is COVID, we know the existential challenge which is going to keep on coming back is climate change, and we have a set of work streams that are giving us the finances and giving us the ideas to deal with that in the college. And also the importance of well-being to the sanity of our students and our staff and everyone connected with the college, because we know extraordinary times produce extraordinary results. There's a lot of resilience among the people in Wolfson, but there's a lot of challenge to them as well, and the ability to have extra staff, extra provision to support those facing those challenges has been really vital. But the other thing looking forward to the future, and one of you said they were very interested to know a little bit more about the development plans for the college, is the master plan for the college. And let me just say a little bit about the way this was run. We wanted to not move straight into architecture, but first of all ask a wide range of people what they thought a future Wolfson would be looking like in 25, 30, 40 years' time. And we came to 4 broad conclusions. The first was that in 30, 40 years' time, there will still be a need for places where people can study their doctorates, their PhDs, their DPhils. There will always be the need for people to go beyond an undergraduate experience in order to build the ideas, the expertise, the creativity, the knowledge that is needed in a knowledge-based society. So we're confident that that will remain. We're also pretty confident the internal combustion engine will be dead, and that will flow through not just to having no internal combustion engine cars, but to a whole range of ways in which we power and provide the energy for our environment. And that the idea that international students will be able to get on a plane and come to us and then go home 3 times a year, that is going to get less and less likely. And therefore, the distinction between term and vacation time is going to blur in ways that it started to, but that will go even further. And then the final conclusion is that Oxford will remain a place of dreaming spires and international excellence, even if, and perhaps related to, the question of where the UK's place in the world is. And I, for example, have a personal view that the UK will probably come out of this a slightly chastened and more moderate and modest place, but internationalism at this university is going to remain absolutely central. So based upon those broad conclusions, we came up with some architectural ideas, and you may be able to see a little bit of the look. So basically the white is the existing buildings, and the kind of pink or brown is the new buildings we're looking at. And as you can see, this is a very ambitious set of proposals for things that I and my successors and my successors' successors may be doing in the course of the next 30, 40 years. The ones I want to concentrate upon are the 3 that are immediate plans for us. So the first is a gym. We've learnt that in the COVID period, having a gym is absolutely vital, but it's almost impossible to have any number of people coming through the tiny current gym if you have to social distance. And so we'll be converting the squash courts into a really good gym that can be used for everyone in the college, particularly for our rowing, where our rowing team is at the moment one of the most excellent in the whole university. But that quality of gym is one of the things the student body has said they really think is important. So that's the first thing we're moving on. The second is something called the Long Gallery. And on the picture here, you'll see the big red arrow points to that raised lawn area, you may remember, that sits underneath the bottom floor of that A building. And what the architects have seen and noticed, which we didn't know, is that that could be a whole new floor where you would be able to create one single long gallery, where we'd be able to have our collection of contemporary art, where events would allow you to go straight out onto the lawn. So this is what it would look like. You go straight out onto the lawn, so it would allow the lawn and this building, this room, to be an indoors and an outdoors that mould one into the other. A fantastic social space, a fantastic place for large numbers of people to mingle or to work together, as well as display our fantastic selection of art. And also the final element is a new building. Those of you who remember where the South Car Park was, that in the original designs right the way back to the late 60s, we'd planned to have an extra wing there, and this would be completing the original view and turning that into a garden building where 50 students from the college could live in rather than having to go out and live in the Oxford community. So that's a look at what the college will be looking like in 10, 20, 30 years' time. I wanted to end, if I might, just on a final quote from the great Warren Buffett, who said, "Someone today is sitting in the shade because someone planted a tree a long time ago." And I do think that we are a place where the long term is what really matters. And it is our job to plant those trees, be they literal trees, be they plans for the future, be they new gyms and new buildings, so that the next generation of students and the generation after that appreciate what Wolfson has to offer in ways that we've been lucky enough to experience ourselves. So that's my presentation. Hugh, do please open the floor.
Thank you very much, Tim. We now have some questions that have been submitted by our audience in advance, but we also have the opportunity for you watching at home or wherever you may be to ask some questions via the chat function on YouTube. Now, to ask a question, you would need to be logged in to a YouTube or Google account. However, if you don't have one, you can email your question to alumni.office@wolfson.ox.ac.uk, where my colleague Claire will relay it to us via the chat function. But we'll start with some questions that we've received in advance. And the first one is from Andy Dobson in the United States, who says, "It seems unlikely that COVID-19 is a one-off event. What will the chief lessons that we will learn for future disease outbreaks?"
I mean, Andy, I'm absolutely sure that it's not a one-off, and that this kind of thing will keep coming back at us. I suppose it's very difficult to know what lessons to draw now, because we feel very much still right in the middle of it. And we don't know whether we will, for the rest of our lives, be living with an element of coronavirus as part of our lives, or whether it will become one of those events which we look back on historically and say was a significant moment. But the things that we've drawn from this are, first of all, the importance of staying open right the way throughout an event like this, our ability to continue to provide a home for people in Wolfson, however deep the lockdown. Second, we've learnt about the absolute critical function of openness in communication, the bond of trust between, as it were, the leadership of the college and the people who make up the college. And so we've been extremely transparent in describing both what we know and what we don't know. And I think in a period of great worry, it's important that you are honest about both what you do know and share and what you don't know yet. And then there are some very practical conclusions, and the gym, I think, is probably one of them, that what a college provides is not simply a space where people can sit and study, but it provides a community, and it provides a place where you can get a work-life balance. And the gym proved absolutely vital. I mean, some of the most interesting and difficult conversations I had over the summer were discussing with our students how we could manage to reopen the gym and under what conditions, whether we could take the gym equipment outside so that they could do more of the gym work outside. So just the physical well-being that is so important to a student, and the physical well-being being so important to mental well-being. So I think those are probably some of the lessons. I could talk a lot about Zoom and technology, but I think those are probably lessons that apply to every single sphere of business and professional life.
Thanks very much, Tim. Our next question comes from Nancy Mackey in the United States, and there's two questions here. One is the John Stallworthy Poetry Prize fully funded? And the second is, who judges the application poems? And if I may, I'll respond to the first of those questions myself, which is to say, Nancy, that the prize is almost fully funded now. We had a tremendous response from friends and alumni to our appeal last year to endow the prize, which is awarded for the best poetry by any graduate student at Oxford in honour of our late colleague and fellow of the college, John Stallworthy. We had a target of £75,000 to raise, and we're now almost there, within about £5,000 of the target. Tim, perhaps you could answer, who judges the applications?
So, I mean, people know this is for the best graduate poet in Oxford. So we are very lucky. We have the Professor of Poetry, who is one of the judges. And we have another gentleman called Dennis Donahue, who is an established poet himself. And so they are the two key judges. They're actually the ones who set the theme for each year's poetry. And then they are the ones who make the judgments. And it's supported by the English department and the college itself. And actually, it's always in this building on John Stallworthy's birthday that the prize is given. It's always an extremely high caliber, and we're just so pleased that this is not simply one off, two off, will it continue next year, but we now know, provided we reach that final target, that we're going to be able to do this in perpetuity. It's a wonderful tribute to a man who was so central to the history of this particular college.
Thank you, Tim. Our next question is from Carla Polman here in the UK. And the question is, what can we learn from the COVID crisis for higher education? And how can we use it to demonstrate the ever-increasing importance of higher education in its wake?
I mean, as I said earlier on, I think we do need to wait a little bit longer to see what the impacts will be. And I think there is a question of equality in here that one needs to bear in mind, because, to be honest, I think the experience of the very top universities is that though they've had major challenges, and I and all my other heads of house around Oxford have been working right the way through the summer just to prepare for this term, we've had an ability to do that, and a college system that allows us to provide that personal support service to students, which allows them not to worry about things and to concentrate on their studies, paradoxically. And so, our students have arrived. If they've had to self-isolate, we've been able to provide hot meals to them in their rooms. We've had a bar open for them. And so because of the small home-like nature of a college, we've been able to offer them a very secure environment, and that actually they've probably benefited from knowing that they're in that kind of secure environment. Whether, if one is looking at other universities where the balance of individualized support to general support is slightly different, whether you would say that the case for further education there is in the long term being made more effectively is, I think, an open question. Because I think in a university which doesn't provide that personalised service, there are real questions being asked at the moment, certainly at the undergraduate level, as to whether the service that somebody is getting in one of those universities for £9,000 a year is value for money. And I think those questions will get more intense if the virus and the pandemic continues right the way through into next term, into next summer. But equally, if we're seeing it peak now and it diminishes, those questions may be fading away. So I do think that we're likely to find that the most elite, if one's allowed to use that word, the most sought-after universities may become even more sought after, but other universities may find themselves really challenged. And in the short term, it's clear that students are very often wanting to come to a university for further education in order to pause their job hunt for a year or two or three when the times may be better. But I think that probably is a short-term phenomenon, and in a world where jobs are going to be tighter, it'll be interesting to see whether the numbers of people going to university as a whole continue to be as high as they have been. So I think it'll be a slightly differentiated result, and it'll be good news for some, but quite challenging news for some other. I mean, I'd certainly, of course, argue that in this global economy, you need further education to provide the skill sets to allow you to get the best jobs and produce the best ideas to be competitive everywhere in the world. That goes without saying. But the reality of what this means for individual universities may be a little more challenging.
Tim, our next question follows quite neatly on from that, and it's from Matthew Waite here in the UK. And the question is, how should research-intensive universities support those universities with different missions and student demographics?
It does connect rather well, doesn't it? Because, here in Oxford last year, for the first time, we have more graduate students than we have undergraduates. And certainly if you look at the reputation of a university like Oxford in the global rankings, it's more to do with the research product, the work particularly that our medical sciences and our other sciences sides produce, that gives it its place as number one in the world. So I think what I would say in an indirect answer to that question is that it's really important that people who come from other universities whose model, whose task is much more focused on teaching, they have a place that when those students have left them, they can take their brightest students and come to places which are research intensive, and therefore we can help people reach their potential. It's also important that when we collectively as universities are lobbying the government on whatever the latest brainwave might be, that you have the voice in that room as part of that community of some of the big research intensive universities in lobbying the government, as well as those universities which are primarily teaching universities. So I think that partnership in terms of getting policy across persuasively to government is really important as well. And many of my academics here at Wolfson will have had extremely powerful experiences working in primarily teaching universities. And then they come here and they are some of the very best teachers. And I mean, I would honestly say that we have on our academic staff some people who are academically brilliant, but whose skill set isn't primarily in teaching. And we have those whose skill is very much teaching are really, really valued by our students and by our graduate students. So you need that mix of people to make a successful university.
Tim, our next question comes from Sangamitra Ramachanda in India. And the question is, COVID has resulted in faster digital uptake in education and presents an opportunity for Wolfson alumni to stay more connected than ever before. Can Wolfson leverage its overseas alumni more regularly through virtual events, such as via its various research clusters?
So it's certainly true that there are opportunities, such as the one I was just talking about earlier on the art tour, where when we run events, we're able to make them accessible internationally. Finding the right time to do that can be a challenge for live-only events, because we would normally do events at sort of 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, and that works perhaps for American friends who are able to take time off at lunch, but might require a late-night person in East Asia. But equally, we now have the technology to record key lectures and events like this so that people can plug into them. I think this is, I mean, it oughtn't to be a new world to people, but I think to many of those in this college, it has been a relatively new world, and some of the clusters have been quite good at it. And I think the Law, Justice and Society group have been very good at adapting to the new opportunities. Others are taking their time to come to it. I mean, I sincerely hope that people will be spotting the opportunities that come from the end of geography in terms of the technology. And certainly those of us who are trying to run clusters which are dealing with global issues or issues relating to a number of locations will find this a real opportunity. And with one of my other hats on, I'm the chairman of an organisation which looks after relations between Japan and the UK, and we have traditionally run events about Japan based in the UK for a UK audience. And over the lockdown, we've discovered that our numbers have tripled because we've got audiences suddenly dialing in from Japan and from the United States. So it absolutely can be done, and it's in the forefront of our minds in terms of the communication. As far as alumni events are concerned, I mean, we're doing this, we'd like to do more. It's great to have your feedback that you would like us to do more of these kind of events. It depends upon the time that Hugh has on his shoulders and is able to do this, but I think it absolutely is going to be the way of the future. And it does link to this question of whether we will be able to travel by plane as much as we have done in the past. We kind of assume that we'll get back to a point where we will be able to make regular visits around the world as often, but we may not, or we may start taking ethical decisions about reducing the amount of flying we do, and building those person-to-person relationships down the line in order to compensate for that decision.
Tim, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the pre-submitted questions, but we've received a couple live. So I'll take firstly a question from Ping Lu, which is about how do we select research fellows at Wolfson? and what suggestions you might have for a postdoc's career path, whether that's into industry or remaining within the university and pursuing further research.
So Wolfson has since its very origins been a place that wants to support not just graduate students, but also those people who've got a DPhil, a PhD, but haven't yet got an established academic post. So those early career researchers have always been part of who we are. And we now have 100 junior research fellows or research fellows. About 25 of those are research fellows and 75 are junior research fellows. So typically a junior research fellow will just have come out from having done a DPhil in the first few years, whereas a research fellow will probably have been in that world for 6 or 7 or 8 years. The way people apply is that we have 2 waves of application every year. One wave looks to recruit people primarily from the medical sciences and from other sciences, and the second wave looks to recruit people from the humanities and from the social sciences. And you go onto our website and you'll see the adverts for those applications. There are a few of them which are for stipendiary RFs and JRFs, so these are ones where we as a college have the money to do the recruiting. The majority are for non-stipendiary, so these are people who are coming to Oxford already or working in Oxford at the university at the department level but don't have a college affiliation and really want to have the life of a college to surround and support them while they are studying. And so please apply. We take probably about 12 or so from each of those categories every year, and you will stay for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Many of our research fellows leave after a few years because it's been a brilliant stepping stone onto something greater, and we're always happy to see people leave if they're going off to an established position. As far as the career point and how you design your career, I mean, the statistics one needs to be very honest about. So the numbers of people who are PhDs who then can move into early career research work is fairly small, and the number of those who then move into established academic positions is also relatively small. So you need to be pretty clear in your mind what risks, what challenges you're willing to take. And it is a world that does demand a lot of confidence in yourself and your own ability to set your own research tasks. But the success and the freedom in a place like Oxford for those who have the excellence and have the self-discipline to keep driving themselves forward is remarkable. And there is a freedom in this place, a sort of a lack of structure in a way, that means those with initiative and those with drive can achieve just about anything, because we are run by academics, and therefore the interests of academics are absolutely at the heart of what we do. So good luck with your career. Think very hard about it. There are as many, if not many more, brilliant opportunities out there in the non-academic world as there are in the academic world. But find the thing that suits you personally, and always talk to somebody who's about a year or two ahead of you and see how they've done it, because that often gives you a great steer as to what's the best way yourself to make your decisions.
Tim, our final question tonight takes us back to the master plan, and it comes from another Tim, who asks if you could perhaps briefly outline and say a few more words about the 25-year development plan.
So when this all started, because Oxford Council, very sensibly, what it hates is a college that says we'd like to build this building, and then 2 years later we'd like to build that building, and 3 years later we'd like to build the other. So before they give permission for any building, they want a master plan that gives a sense of what the whole college will look like in 30, 40 years' time. So that's why we get this comprehensive plan. And the tasks that we set, the architects, were to again listen to us about what a college is going to be like in 30, 40 years' time, see if you can show us how we create space for 150 new rooms, because we are a college of about 700 people, but we have 300 rooms. That means the majority of our people have to live out, and yet the quality of things that Wolfson offers rests so much in its physical location. So we asked them to look at how they would create 150 extra rooms so that every single one of our first new students could get a room in college. It felt us very important we supported people in their first year, but also a place that was extremely sensitive to what the climate change repercussions would be. And one of the reasons we chose Penoyd and Prasad as our architectural firm were that they had a very strong reputation for being at the forefront of design that works on limiting impacts and emissions. And we also described very clearly we wanted a college that felt not like a place for students who come in and out, but felt like a home where families could feel at home, that felt like a place that one could live all year round, and felt like a place that retained its quality as a place of quiet monastic study, as it were. And so those three elements I described were the earliest elements, but if you remember the college well, as it's got a brilliant view out and relationship with the meadows and the countryside, but it's got a slightly jarring relationship with the Edwardian villa landscape of North Oxford. And so what we wanted to do is to connect us with North Oxford, so face towards North Oxford, build not just space for people to live in and families to live in, but also places where we could have research establishments, where our clusters could grow into more substantial places for intellectual life. So really make ourselves both an intellectual hub as well as a home for our people. And we've been in touch with a number of organisations who are interested in working with us. This will be a long run thing. As I say, it won't be something that will be finished when I leave here. It will be something that will be for my successors to continue. But I think we have done a very good job at describing the future we want to see. And it always takes me back to that wonderful quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if it is really him, which is, if you want to predict the future, invent the future. And so I think we are trying both to invent our own future and hoping that way that we will make it more likely that it will come to pass. So thank you for the question.
Tim, thank you very much, and thank you everyone who's joined us at home for tonight's presentation. Before we close, I'll just say, please subscribe to Wolfson's YouTube channel for more talks, lectures and events. As Sir Tim mentioned earlier on, we've got a number of events here in college that will be broadcasting live. These include Hermione Lee, our former president, speaking about her new book on the playwright Tom Stoppard on the 3rd of November. We have our annual Sarfraz lecture on Pakistan, given by Farida Shahid, the distinguished sociologist and human rights activist, on the 12th of November, and many more in the weeks ahead, so please do check our website for details. Until then, thank you all very much.